Hi, everyone. Welcome to Passing into the Future, the official PASS podcast that connects students to resources and advice on school, the workforce, and life in general. This is our first season, so we appreciate any feedback you guys may have, okay? Please feel free to email us at pass@fiu.edu or DM us on Instagram at pass.fiu, and pass is PASS. So that's PASS.FIU on Instagram. If you have any questions, comments, or critiques, let us know. So our first season is going to focus on the graduate school process because we're really getting into graduate school season, okay? December is that magical time when many applications are due. No matter how far along you are in your process, or if you're applying this cycle, next cycle, doesn't matter. We want to give you guys a better picture of what the steps to take are and what obstacles you might face. So just to introduce, we are your co-hosts. I'm Io.
I'm Nyla.
I'm Fabiana.
I'm Roberto.
And I'm Alyssa.
So this is your Passing into the Future team. We're going to start off with our first segment, which is self-care and wellness, hosted by our girl Nyla. Take it away. Let us know.
Okay, guys. So with this segment, I wanted to talk about self-care, right? So I feel like with anything, you have to first define what self-care is. So what I found when I was researching is, I found that self-care was the practice of choosing intentional activities to meet your mental and physical health in a holistic way, right? I feel like self-care, when you talk about it, the main concept that a lot of people have is like to pamper yourself and just give yourself bubble baths and like to spoil yourself. And like sometimes I think self-care means that you have to do things that are uncomfortable for you to do. So think of it at like a muscle at the gym, right? If you're training, the way that you build a bigger muscle is by ripping the old fibers, right? So by ripping those old fibers, you build bigger ones. So applying that logic to self-care, you kind of have to make a conscious effort to change your old habits and struggle a little bit, but knowing that that struggle is helping you work towards a goal that you would like to accomplish. Obviously, I think in later episodes, I would love to establish or kind of paint the picture of what it looks like to build a self-care routine. Well, before I dive into the next part, what do you guys think about all this? Like, where do you or any opinions about the self-care or anything like that?
I would definitely say in terms of building routine and muscle, like especially now that the semester is almost ending, it's so important to make time for yourself to upkeep and get the things you need to have done, Also try to really hone in your community support, try to make time, just spend time with friends and enjoy yourself so you can't feel isolated and things. But it sounds good, your idea of like just building up these things to like have a more function for self-care.
Yeah,
For sure.
I like that you described it as a muscle. Because it's hard to build those routines, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm gonna do this, like I'm gonna do a face mask every other night, and then it's been 3 weeks and you did it one time.
Right.
So like
it'd be like that. It'd be like that.
Yeah, like you use 10 face masks in one night and then never again. But yeah, I think that's like really important and powerful. Like it's a muscle. So like, especially when you like feel like, oh, I fell off that wagon, that's like, okay, you can always hop back on. That's something I keep trying to remind myself. It's like, it's okay to like miss those little, self-care appointments with yourself. You can get back there.
Yeah, like, and having the compassion for when you do fall off the wagon, like you said, you can just hop back on. But I think that's like the biggest thing I realized, like for me to have it be consistent, you have to kind of make some sort of routine. But maybe I'm like built different and like that works for me. Maybe some people like they're more in tune with their needs and like they do it when they need it. But I feel like for me, having like a set kind of structure helps me implement it more. So that's why I think I would want to talk about how to do that in the podcast. Alyssa, did you have anything to add?
I actually did because I'm not big on self-care myself. Like it's been so hard to kind of jump on that wagon because I have so much going on, and like as a grad student still, like so much is happening, like seeing clients, like doing homework, so many things that it's kind of hard to jump on the wagon. And like if you've had that routine, it's easy to continue it, and like you were saying, falling off and like getting back on is easy, but like when you've never had it, it's really hard to try and jump into it. So like now that I'm graduating soon, like I'm so worried and anxious of like what am I like, gonna do with my life after, like, how am I going to take care of myself now that like I have nothing to occupy my time? Like I have no like homework, or I don't have school to focus on, like I have nothing. So like how am I going to jump on that self-care wagon? And lately I've been thinking of like reading more, which is also a part of self-care. Like if you have like that imagination to like read, that's part of self-care. Like I've been wanting to jump on that. Recently the gym has been like my thing. I go to FIU's gym pretty much almost 3 days out of the week, like 3 mornings out of the week, and it's been like my self-care, like putting on my beats, listening to whatever music. Like I said in like our introduction, I'm like very big on Stitch, very big on Disney, so like I'll listen to my Disney villains music, like I'm in my villain era, like running at the gym,
Get
you
into
know.
it. Yes.
Mhm.
You
That's
know, so
to do.
that's just what I do. And like even running outside, sometimes just having like that runner's high that people have, just like thinking and like releasing any like emotion that could come up, is so healing for me. So like that's been my thing, even though I've been so inconsistent. But like I've been trying to build it a little bit now that I'm like, what am I gonna do with my life after December 11th?
For sure. I think that's a really like solid point to talk about. I feel like we all at some point are like, okay, how do I even get into self-care, or like what does that even look like? So that is something that I wanted to kind of talk about. Because I like went through that recently, like in the beginning of the fall. I was like, okay, like I have so many things I want to do, but like I don't even know how to start. So I like did a little bit of research on my own, like how do you establish like your own routine and stuff. I think there were like a couple points I wanted to hit on today to start off with. So something that worked for me in starting with the self-care was kind of like to establish your values. And then once you know like what are big values in your life, then that's going to help you go down and like pick goals that will help you live in alignment with those values, if that makes sense. So for example, let's say that you value physical health, like you said, right? So then in your case, you started going to the gym maybe like 3 to 4 times a week. You can also commit to walking at least 6,000 steps daily, or even going for like a half an hour walk each day. If you've ever done like a mind map, you can even do like self-care in the middle and then like do the values. You could do physical health, organization, and like just kind of do smaller goals based off of that. So let's say that another value that you have is being organized, right? But you always find that you have like a messy car or like a messy room. So what you could do is have a goal of like, okay, I'm going to allocate 15 minutes to clean my car or my room every day. And like that helps kind of simplify goals that you want to reach into like smaller, more concrete steps. So are there any values that like you have that you think you would like shift that into a goal?
I really like that part about like values and goals, because like then part of self-care is also like knowing your own self-image and like what are the things you need, and like actually writing down your goals. Like for me, some of them would be like self-respect, like self-actualization, like things that can help me progress in knowing who I am and what are the things I want in my life. Like doing that kind of diagram really sounds like a good idea to get that going.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Especially like, self-actualization, I think is something that's there for me too. And growth. I don't like to feel stagnant. Like I love learning. I love to feel like I'm always learning something new and I'm growing. Like I have a running competition myself in my head, which is like I always want like next week, EO to be better than last week EO. I think the future is kind of beating my ass, but yeah, I feel like I do like that. Something for self-care for me, I love like documentaries and especially like really informative stuff. And I feel like I don't participate in like learning new skills and growing as much as like I could. So I think that's something that I could add as a goal. Yeah, I think that's cool. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. What about you guys? What about Rob? Has been quiet. Rob is we kind of kidnapped him for this podcast. Yes, he's actually just a producer. Yeah, that's a producer, but we're having him talk.
Well, he is the president of PAS.
Exactly. Mr. President, be presidential. Lead.
Everybody.
Yeah, I feel like establishing goals, even if they're short term, having both short term and long term is good for kind of keeping pace with, your mental health, keeping up with wellness. obviously they have to be realistic. You don't want to make them unrealistic, because the unrealistic ones are the ones that mess you up the most. So obviously, make short-term goals that you could achieve. You don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow, so always keep that in mind too. But it's always about, control what you could control. That's a good way to, be good.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. What about
Yeah, I
you?
agree. Like having, yeah, jumping in. Yeah, I agree. Like having short-term and long-term goals is very helpful. Especially if you're trying to achieve something bigger than what like you've ever expected. Like it's always nice to have like 5-10 year goals. To like try and achieve. Like right now for me in 2 years I want to get licensed, or like in 5-10 years like have my own practice, like trying to achieve those goals. But in between, what short-term goals are we looking at? Like what certifications are we wanting to get? What kind of like population are we wanting to work for? Like what population aren't we wanting to work for? So like that's where like your internship and practicum years are also good too, like, or just any type of experience in general is also good to establish those short-term goals of like what can I do? Even in self-care, like maybe read a page a day, or like read one chapter a day, like starting off small. As you were like saying things, and then I was like, yeah, like kind of practice makes perfect. And in that practice, just kind of like starting off tiny, and like as that time, like that small goal is achieved, then like making it bigger and bigger. So like if I'm wanting to read books, like start off with one chapter a day, or like 3 pages a day if like a chapter is not possible. So I think it's really helpful to try and like make that practice and like implement that practice to eventually get to the goal that we're looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's like the perfect segue, I think, because something that I like noted in my own notes here was that it's crucial to start off with like small steps, because I feel like when we have a goal, we want to just have like a 180 shift, but like the changes that happen fast, like they're not long lasting. So it's better to start off with like those small steps that like you could accomplish, because then when you start accomplishing, let's say like you want to start to read, like you said, right? You read like 1 page a day, and then like you accomplish that, you are, not only does that bring you closer to your goal, but it also like shows that you can keep your own promises, and it builds that sense of trust within yourself that helps propel you to keep sticking with the goal and even going further like each time.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
I did want to switch to like the other side of self-care, right? So we talked about growing, we talked about challenging ourselves, but I think with self-care, we also do have to talk about pampering ourselves a little bit. So I did want to talk a little bit about that side of self-care. So I just wanted to give some ideas what we traditionally think of self-care as. So for example, I feel like whenever you are looking for things to do in terms of self-care, it's really important to look at the needs that you have, right? So for example, let's say that lately you're missing the physical touch, right? So something that can help you meet those needs are maybe like going to get a manicure, or getting a massage, or even like investing in a weighted blanket, which it feels like you're like, it feels like just weight on you, and like, you feel like you're being hugged. So that's like a very good avenue for getting that need met. And then so another need you could have is, let's say that you've been feeling disconnected from yourself, right? So you can start to tune into that. You can give yourself like a rest day where you can kind of dedicate that time to yourself, where you would dedicate it to other activities. So you can write yourself like a love letter, or you can even just take the day and relax and do absolutely nothing and just enjoy your free time, which I think is something a lot of people, especially us that are like in school, we're like trying to achieve, trying to improve ourselves. It's learning to have that grace and like making that space for ourselves to relax and enjoy our free time without feeling guilty or that we should be getting work done. I feel like that's something I deal with.
Yeah, I feel that so deeply. When I got out of bed at 8 a.m. today, and I was like, oh my God, like, what is wrong with you? You slept in. And I'm like, no, like, I can be really hard on myself. Like, if that 7 a.m. alarm goes off and I'm still in bed, like, I have like a whole battle in my head. And I'm trying to like let that go and just be like, like even today, my day doesn't really officially start until the afternoon, but it's just like so many things I have on my to-do list that I'm like, I feel like I don't have enough hours, and I like put some stuff off, and then I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna do everything at the same time, realize 24 hours is not that long, and then end up just like in this whole internal battle. So like those days off, it can be hard to take that without guilt.
100%. And I feel like hearing you say the to-do list, I'm like, I feel like ever since college started, it's felt like a never-ending to-do list. So it's like something will always come up, and it makes it so much harder to have that time for yourself. So it's like, it's honestly really hard to do it. I still haven't gotten there yet, but maybe someday. Maybe someday.
Yeah, these are the goals.
Yeah, I mean, like, especially with like those to-do lists that they feel like they're never ending. It's good in like the self-care aspect to just acknowledge like, hey, today I got one thing done. That's one thing, and I put my effort to do this thing for myself, whatever it may be, you know, take it little by little, because then I'll be too like, I'm doing all this in one day and then I'm sober out and then I can't do anything, and it will be like this bad cycle. So it's like having this way to balance everything, and trying meditation to just like unplug and clear the mind of like all these different stressors. Like, I think it's
Yeah, 100%.
Well, for the first episode, I kind of wanted to just introduce the idea of self-care, and maybe for the future, we can dive a little bit deeper into some of the aspects that we talk about, maybe like building a routine and what that looks like. But yeah, thank you guys for sticking by the segment.
Thank you so much, Nyla, for, giving us the intro to self-care. And also, like, I really loved the values and goals portion. I'm about to add that to my to-do list, make a self-care plan. But so now we're going to transition into an interview we did with a first-year PhD student named Sol Quincoses, and they tell us a little bit about gap years. So they actually took a 5-year gap year, which it's a while, but they got a lot of great work experience and also skills from that process. So we asked them a couple of questions about that. And I'm really excited for you guys to, see what we can kind of glean from that interview. And also Sol is great. They're actually my mentor. And so they've been giving me a lot of great advice. And I just want to share that with you guys. So actually me and Rob were able to ask them a couple of questions, which is why we kidnapped Rob to be in this episode, kicking and screaming, but he's here. So we're going to go ahead and play that now for you guys. So today we're going to be talking to Sol Quincoses about gap years and their experience taking gap years. They are a first-year student in the Applied Social and Cultural Psychology doctoral program at FIU under the mentorship of Professor Stacy Frazier. So Sol, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what it is you study.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me here. As you said, I'm a first year in the ASCP program. That's the shorthand. My research interests specifically are about leveraging community spaces to allow marginalized youth to have better access to mental health care resources. And kind of related to that, I'm also interested in why Florida specifically has such a high involuntary commitment rate and how we can prevent youth from ending up there who would actually do not need involuntary commitment, but would benefit from earlier preventative resources.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So, of course. So, going off of what it is that you're focused on, do you think that the time you spent, like the gap between your undergraduate and graduate, do you think it was beneficial in helping you kind of narrow down what you wanted to study?
Absolutely. So I graduated from undergrad in 2018, and I took 5 years off. So I'm starting my PhD now in 2023. And that wasn't the plan. I thought I was going to do the whole like, oh, I'll just get a, 2-year position, research position, just kind of get a bit more experience, make a little bit of money, have some savings, and then go into grad school. And that was kind of that's one of the very traditional paths into a clinical psych PhD. And originally I thought I was going to do clinical psychology. So I thought I was going to be a clinician and also doing research. And so when I graduated, I was in New York. I went to Barnard College for undergrad. So I was in New York. I took an internship post-graduation, which is a move. It was unpaid,
Oh,
but I kind of finessed funding from one of my from a program that Barnard had. So I was getting a stipend for that summer still, even though I was technically graduated. And I took an internship at Bellevue Hospital in their substance use day program.
okay.
And that was, I was a social work intern. That was really enlightening. And I was able to interact with a ton of different professionals, social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, and I had a really good exposure to a bunch of different professions that are not just being a clinical psychologist. So for a hot second, I thought I wanted to become a psychiatrist from that
Oh.
experience. And I very seriously considered doing a post-bac and doing the like pre-med post-bac, and then trying to go for medical school. So I started talking to a bunch of psychiatrists and doctors and people who had gone through medical school. And at the same time, once that internship ended, I took a different job at a clinical practice. And that was where I was like, okay, I'll do the 2 years in this clinical practice and then I'll apply. So that at that point, that was my route if I didn't do the post-bac. I spoke to a psychiatrist at that clinical practice and she gave me really amazing advice. And she was like, you know, think back to the parts of your career so far where you have found the most light, where you have found yourself enjoying it the most. Like, what was that task or what were the things you were doing? And when I reflected on that, I realized that I actually really, really enjoyed the parts of my job where I was actually doing research or reading about research. So, you know, reading the articles, seeing what's actually happening, conducting experiments, getting results, all of that I found were actually like my favorite parts of the job, which was interesting. And that's like none of the clinical aspects, right? That's not
Yeah.
interacting with the kids at the clinic. That wasn't part of it. I loved the management side. I loved coordinating and creating events. I really liked mentoring. So when I would talk with the RAs, the undergraduate RAs, I really enjoyed mentoring. So there were all of these aspects to what I was doing. And I was like, yeah, that's not what you do in med school. That's not
No.
what psychiatrists do. That's not what, you know, a like therapist does. That's all research and that's all community building. And so that really shifted my perspective then. And it made me realize like, I actually, this path that I've been setting myself on, I don't actually think that's the perfect end all be all. So that's where, you know, this was now a year and a half or something out of undergrad, where I was like, I need to sit and think a little bit more about what it is that I want. And then we have 2020, obviously COVID. And while I was grateful to be out of school, I was really trying to find the right word, not fed up, not frustrated, stuck. I think I felt stuck in my current position. I felt like I wasn't gaining any new or different insight. I had spoken and met with a lot of like school psychologists and PsyDs versus PhDs. And so that was a bit more illuminating as well. But then I finished that position and I dived full time into just application mode and studied for the GRE for like that whole summer after my position, which was wild. Like I quit my job at the beginning of 2020 and then was like unemployed. But it was a choice and it was really risky, but I think it was 100% worth it because I don't think I
Yeah.
would have actually gained all of the insight that I did and if I had just stayed at that job. So then I took a different position just to sustain myself while I was doing apps.
Mhm.
And I was the supervisor of a hepatitis C program at Montefiore Medical Center. So that was in the Bronx. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time. So I was commuting from Brooklyn to the Bronx. Yeah,
That's far.
during COVID. It was a time. Um, and it was an amazing opportunity as well. I learned so much, and also was just being in a supervisory role, it was very different. So I felt challenged. I felt really, really grateful to be in that kind of position where I was able to think more again on that like bigger behind the scenes lens, as opposed to the like individual day to day, even though we did also have individual day to day meetings.
Yeah.
And when I applied the first round, I actually did not get in. I applied to clinical and counseling programs, and I joined this society called Científico Latino, and it's a society for helping STEM Latino students apply to graduate school. So it's a really fantastic resource. They have a mentoring program. So I was paired with a mentor to help me through my apps. And then I was also being mentored by someone else who had just started her PhD at Teachers College at Columbia in counseling psychology. Shout out to Tatiana, she's amazing. So from that like failure, I felt really devastated. I was so upset. I was like, I don't even know if this is the path for me. Like, am I, have I been wrong this whole time? Maybe I don't belong in this sphere. So I had all of those doubts. So, and now I graduated 2020. Now this was spring 2021. I got all these, rejections. And I was like, it's been so long. I don't want to keep working anymore. I don't want to keep being in this in-between space. And then the grant for which I was hired for the hepatitis C program ended. And so then I had to find yet another position. And so I was like, okay. And I wanted to very seriously think and focus, like, what are the gaps in my resume? Or my CV? What kind of position would be best for me to take on next to really understand this whole grad school thing and what path I want. So I was trying to think a lot more strategically that way. And I accepted a position as an RA, or a research coordinator for a neuroimaging lab at the New York State Psychiatric Institute / Columbia University Medical Center. They're all kind of interrelated. And so that was notably a step back, right? I went from being a supervisor at this clinic to then working at yet another hospital system in New York. I'm just collecting them, and being a research coordinator. But honestly, I think that was really the right move for me, and I stand by that choice. It was a really incredible opportunity. I was really in the weeds of like clinical research, and was having all of these experiences that I had really wanted to, like working on the IRB and getting a lot of day in day out like consenting participants and data collection. I was able to do a couple posters, and it was just like really, really great, really great experience. Was I able to do a couple posters? Yes, I was. Trying to remember. I don't want to say anything that was incorrect. But yeah, it was in COVID study too. So we were looking at the health outcomes for mothers who either did or didn't have COVID during pregnancy.
Okay.
And we were looking at health outcomes, not just for the moms, but also for the infants. So it was a dyadic approach. We were also seeing how that affected the dyad, so mom and baby together, and then mom and baby individually. Really amazing, unique study. And I was doing the neuroimaging aspects. So I was doing all the MRIs for them. So that was an amazing skill. Got also to really flex my like baby skills, which was really nice. And a huge chunk of the population were Spanish speakers. So I was also able to practice using Spanish at like a research level. So that was an incredible opportunity, and I went in for the application cycle for 2022 to enter 2023, and I definitely shifted my mindset and was able to understand, like, I do really enjoy working at this like bigger or more like zoomed out lens, that level that is, you know, more focused on the systems themselves, on the communities, as opposed to like individual. You know, it's kind of like what's happening in the background, what are the policies that are affecting this? So I was strategically less looking at programs that were like, okay, this is a clinical program, I'll apply to it. It was more like, what program, what school, what professor has this kind of approach, has this approach where it's also multidisciplinary, where they're understanding that like policy has as much to do as the science, as the nature, as the nurture, like, and really bringing in that lens. And that's how I ended up finding the applied social and cultural psychology program, because I'd actually applied to Dr. Frazier before in that first cycle, but didn't get in. And then she informed me that they were setting up this new program. And so when I learned about it, I was like, this is perfect. This is everything I've been looking for in a PhD program. And now that I'm in it, you know, in my first semester, it couldn't be more true. It's just incredible, the things that we're learning and doing and talking about. It's definitely, I think, exactly where I wanted to be. That was a long answer to your, is a gap year a good idea? Absolutely. Please take a gap year. It's noticeable when you don't.
Oh, it's not okay.
Oh.
Okay, I think what I'm hearing for you is, number one, that gap year really helped you narrow down what it is you want to do, and not just like theoretically, but practically. You got to do the different jobs and, you know, be in the different spaces, and then realize, oh, clinical is not for me. Actually, like you said, you want to work in the systems and policy. And it also helps you kind of flex your skills more, like the, you know, being bilingual, and then like also learning how to really manage a program, of course, and, you know, do intake with like study participants, because that's something you're obviously going to be doing with a PhD. You're going to need to know, you know, how to do that. So I think that's pretty awesome. And I know, like, you know, 5 years is a long gap year, but like at that point, you're kind of like an expert in certain things, right? Like certain things you're like, okay, I've done this, not just, you know, once, but this is something that's like a solidified skill for you. So what would you say, I guess, are some things that in those 5 years were the most prominent skills you learned working in like the medical arena that help you today with your research?
That's a great question. I would say just learning how to problem solve is the biggest skill. And it's because I've worked in a lot of positions where it was either like I was the person, like I was either the sole employee, or I was the coordinator. I was put in positions where you have to figure it out. You have to learn on the fly. One of the biggest examples of this is when I was working on the neuroimaging study, and we had to learn how to scan infants successfully. That was a lot of problem solving, along with my lovely lab manager, Martine. And it was her and I in the trenches, really like figuring out how to scan babies properly. And it's something that, you know, we had to look at how other labs did it. We, you know, spoke to a lot of people. I was like Googling certain strategies and looking at other papers and seeing what their approaches were. And then also it was really just like in that moment in the MRI, like, okay, that didn't work, we're trying this. Oh, they kicked that off, I'm gonna double tape it. Like it was so just on the fly trying things out. And that's something that you need confidence to do. You need to be able to think really fast and understand what exactly is the problem in order to find a solution, as opposed to just like following instructions by the letter. Yeah, and then I'm trying to, there's so many probably, but that one I know, having interviewed people for like my previous positions and just to recruit RAs and things, that's the one where I was like, can you problem solve?
Okay.
That will make you successful in these positions. And then I think for, you know, now being in my PhD, it's a lot of people talk about time management, but I think time management is the wrong way to talk about it. It's really about prioritizing. And it's not just prioritizing, okay, like here are the, you know, assignments I have for this week. Which one should I do first? What should I get out of the way? It's really understanding what is important to you. What are you trying to get out of this moment in time for yourself? And moving forward with that philosophy, because there's so many different things that are going to try to grab your attention. And you are the person who has to be like, okay, is it going to be dedicating the, you know, limited time and energy that you have towards assignments, towards family, towards trying to build relationships and friendships with people, or building your research, networking, going to some kind of conference or event somewhere? Like there's all of these different things. So I would say understanding what your values are, what's important to you, discussing that with your mentor too, is what's going to be most successful. So having that, being really, really in tune with your values and your goals is key.
One thing I want to ask, I think the whole thing with the gap year, I'm pretty sure like a lot of undergrads are kind of like scared of what's gonna happen within that gap year if they're not able to, you know, build on the skills. So what would you kind of like advise people into going into their gap year, or like just doing a gap in general before going into like a grad school? What's kind of like some advices?
Yeah, I think it's an understanding of why you're doing it. You know, for me, I went in knowing I wanted specific experiences that would make me a better grad school candidate. But for some people, it might be recovering from the burnout that was undergrad and understanding whether this is a path that they want to continue or not. So really understanding that why you're doing it can help make sure that it's useful time for you. I think a lot of people will try to say like, oh, you know, don't be tempted by the fact that you're making money, like stay on the path, blah, blah, blah. But I think like if you find out along the way in your gap year that continuing on to grad school maybe isn't something you want to do right now, and that you are having a better time or being successful and whatever that means to you, working, you know, in the industry, like do that. I think a lot of people go to grad school because someone told them to, or because they feel compelled to, and that is not a good reason to go into grad school. You will have a terrible time. I mean, I don't know, but maybe you'll have a good time too. But I think figuring out that why you're doing it, why you're taking this gap year, and why you're going to grad school, those are equally important questions to be asking yourself as an undergrad.
What actions do you think that people who have just gotten their, you know, bachelor's can take to really delve into that why, right? Like I know you worked with some research projects, so do you think that would be a good way for people to kind of get the feel and figure out, you know, is this something I want to do?
Yeah, I think getting the feel for it, but just being connected to people that you can talk to who are in the field, in, you know, whatever field that is. For me, it was clinical psych, but I didn't just spend the entire time talking to clinical psychologists. I spoke to school psychologists. I spoke to PhD, PsyDs, psychiatrists. I spoke to social workers. I spoke to counselors. Licensed mental health counselors is a different work degree, not just social work, but
Yeah.
Talking to as many different people as possible to understand, like there are multiple avenues to kind of get to where you want or where you think you want. And so it's understanding, part of figuring out that why is also figuring out the like how. And that being in those spaces and having access to those people, and like people really want to talk to you. They really want to mentor and really want to make sure that you're ending up somewhere that you're excited about, that you don't regret. So yeah, just that. I don't want to call it networking, because networking can seem so like daunting and scary, especially as an undergrad, but that's really what it is technically. But it's not networking in that like, oh, I'm gonna go to this luncheon and mingle with people with a little bubbly drink in my hand. No, it's just like, you know, you have a research position and there's someone, you know, maybe you're at the front desk and there's someone next door, like talk to that person next door and be like, hey, you know, I'm just starting out. I'm curious about your path. You know, I heard you speak about what you were doing the other day. It sounded really cool. Can I talk to you about that for a little bit? And they will absolutely be like, oh my God, please, yes. What are you up to? Blah, 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 and give you all of this unsolicited advice. So definitely that's what I would say. And you can do that now as an undergrad. You can do that with your professors in some of your classes. Maybe they had some guest speakers. Maybe there are upperclassmen or people who just graduated who you know, and you can talk to them about their career. Like I was saying that I was speaking to someone when I was in my gap year, someone who had just gotten into grad school, and her advice was just as invaluable as people who had been in the field for like 20, 30 years.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, to kind of learn for someone who's like even just one step ahead of you, right? Because they got in the door. So, you know, what can you kind of take from that? Okay, so you told us a lot of the pros and a lot of the good aspects that came about, you know, you taking a gap year. What are some things that I guess you would say are cons, or maybe if they're not necessarily cons, but like difficulties that resulted from you taking some time off?
Absolutely. So I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but it's really easy to feel stuck and to feel so like you're not getting anywhere. Oh, you know, and comparing yourself to others can also be really sinister. Like, oh, you know, so and so tech bro that I know is making 200K and I'm out here in my like, you know, little research position. Like, what am I doing? I could be earning so much more. Or I could be doing this, or oh, this person is about to graduate from their program because they went straight through. Like, what am I doing? That those thoughts can be really difficult to like get out of that headspace of comparing yourself to others, of feeling like you're so much more behind because you've taken this, you know, gap year. So I would say that was definitely one of the hardest things. I felt like sometimes I couldn't see myself actually moving forward or learning, even though I was clearly, as I, you know, expressed it. Like I learned a lot and went through a whole bunch of things, but in the moment, it doesn't feel that way. In the moment, it feels like, oh my gosh, why am I doing like another intake? Like, what is this all for?
Definitely understandable that I can feel like, oh, okay, what is the future holding? You know, even though like you are moving forward, but it doesn't feel like it. Yeah, no, I feel like that must be really tough, especially when it's like your end goal is like this PhD and you're like, okay, I just applied to another job. When is the PhD coming?
Yeah, or you know, that rejection from the first round. That is
Yeah.
extremely common in this, especially in psychology, especially in clinical psychology. Like more often than not, I would say the trend is that you have to apply multiple times. Especially if you're, you know, an overachiever like me and you're going for like really competitive programs and places, right? So that having to understand that it's not about me, it's not that I'm not good enough. Having that, it was a really big blow to my ego.
Yeah.
Like really difficult to overcome, and to be like, you know, again, why am I even doing this? What's the point? Like I'm just gonna get rejected again, like I'm not good enough. And getting over that negative self-talk was definitely really difficult. And like, hey, look, I did it. I applied again, even though it was super terrifying and anxiety provoking.
Yeah.
But one of the things that me and my friends say to each other all the time is like, do it scared. And it's like, okay, you know, we're gonna like anxiety or being afraid of the outcome is not necessarily a good enough reason to not do it.
No,
So
I love
try to
that.
challenge
Yeah.
ourselves.
Do it scared. Yeah, because as long as you do it, then you might just be pleasantly surprised that that fear didn't actually hinder anything. You had the capability the whole time. I really love that you said that. I also think, I mean, for me, right, I was since I'm a senior, I was thinking of applying this cycle. Then I was like, when I started to really look into the programs and especially the acceptance rates, one thing I hadn't really realized was even with schools that might not be as competitive for undergrad, their PhD acceptance rates are like 1%, 2%, like that's the norm. But I think in learning that a PhD student, even though it says student, is also kind of an employee. Like, you're not really paying to be there. You're getting tuition remission and you're getting a stipend. So it makes sense that when you apply for a job, a lot of people are applying for that same job. A couple hundred people are applying for this one position where, I mean, as few or as little as one person might be chosen, but as many as maybe 5 people might be chosen. So I think that's something that for me, when I was really looking into, made me think, okay, let me just take a gap year if I'm going to be in such a competitive moment, especially with like clinical, because clinical is, I think, the most competitive psych like doctoral program. I'm like, if I'm going into all this competition, I might as well come with like, game ready, like with as much experience as I can get, as opposed to thinking, oh, let me just keep going through school. And I love that you brought up also like thinking about burnout. Um, because I think something that people always say when it comes to school is like, oh, just go straight through. Because like you brought up earlier as well, that like you might lose a motivation for school if you stop to work, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you're already able to get into a job that you enjoy, that, I guess like pays you well enough, then going back to school might not be something that stays as part of one of your to-dos, or it might stay there and then just get pushed back, like, okay, later on I'll deal with this. So I think that's like super important, and a lot of people don't realize that. Like, it's just very much like, oh, just keep going, and then that's how you get burned out. And for 6 years, sometimes that's not what PhDs are. You don't want to be burnt out by year 1. Like, that's crazy.
Exactly.
You gave us a lot of really great information.
Yeah, most of the answers answered like other questions.
Exactly.
Because I'm planning on applying this cycle. December 1st is my deadline for the legal psych program.
Awesome.
Then one of my professors, Dr. Goldfarb, she was like, yeah, we accept like 1 or 2 students. And I was like, hopefully I'm one of those 1 or 2.
Right.
Yeah, there was 1 legal student accepted this year.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine how many people applied,
You can't fit them in a room.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like a lot of people like overstress themselves. And even me, like I was starting to overstress myself about applying this cycle. And I was just like, look, let's be honest with ourselves. Also I know the applications cost a lot, right?
Yeah, that's a hidden cost that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
I'm a first gen low income student. So part of the thing about Científico Latino, that mentoring program that I had talked about, they were really great at laying out like, here's how much it's going to cost. And luckily, not luckily, it was COVID. And so a lot of the traveling costs, which are the biggest expenses, weren't a thing anymore. Like we did a lot of the interviews over Zoom first. So I do wonder, I think that format is staying a bit hybrid now, but it does still, putting in the applications when I made like and I can share this with you guys if that might be helpful. My like application breakdown, it's like a spreadsheet. I had a column that was how much it costs for that application, because it really puts you into perspective. Like that one is $95. Like, do you really want to go? Do you want to apply to a school that bad? Like, you better have a good reason.
Yeah.
95 out of your pocket. So
Yeah,
it also helps. Like some people are like, oh yeah, I applied to, 15, 20 programs. I'm like, how? You paid how much money?
That's crazy. Yeah, I was listening to this.
Some of them do waive the fees, by the way, if you reach out to them with enough time if you're not a last minute person like me. So just an FYI.
Okay. So email them early. Please make
Exactly.
it free for me. Yeah, I think that's something that also really shocked me when I was really like researching grad programs is some people are easily spending $1,000, $2,000 just to apply, just to not even, get in. I'm like, that's a lot of money, especially if you're like if you're not super confident in the type of applicant you are, then that might just end up being, wasted money, right? Sometimes. But I do want to actually ask, so you applied initially in 2020 and then again in 2022. And I know you said you had applied to work with Stacy both times. How many schools or like how many professors did you initially apply to work with in 2020? And then what about in 2022?
I think I ended up doing a similar number, just kind of different programs. So it was about 7 to 9 for both.
Oh, wow.
I don't know exactly, which is on the lower end, by the way. Like I definitely was gambling.
Got you. Yeah.
I would encourage you to do more than that.
Okay.
However, who am I to tell you what to do?
I mean, you're here now, so
Exactly, I made
you,
it.
you won the gamble. It only took 2 tries. You got the gamble.
Right.
Second time is the charm, not third time.
Some
Yeah.
people do it in 3 though. Like
Yeah.
Tatiana, I think, who I mentioned, I think it was her 3rd time applying, and she got into her dream school, and it was amazing, and I'm so proud of her. But I'm also like, damn, if I had gotten rejected that 2nd time, like I don't know how I would have built up my she's just really strong is what I can say. And I'm so happy for her. She's a 3rd or 4th year now.
It's definitely something that's like difficult not to internalize, like you
Yeah.
told me twice, spent all this money, did all this work, like now what do I do? Like what else can I do?
That's why that why is really important.
Yeah.
So important to know why you're doing it.
Okay, I think that's all my questions. You gave a lot of really great info. Yeah, so thank you, Sol. Do you have any last words for our passing into the future viewers and listeners?
Good luck. I'm glad to not be an undergrad anymore. It was a rough time, and you'll get through it. I believe in
It's
you.
the ghetto. It's the ghetto out here.
Truly.
Okay, so thank you so much
so much.
for, giving us your wisdom. You gave me a lot of great points. I'm taking a lot of mental notes. I'm like, Sol said do this. And we hope you have a great day, okay?
Have a great one. Thank you so
Likewise.
much.
Bye. Okay, guys, thank you for tuning into that interview with Sol. I think they gave a lot of really great information. Some of the things that really stood out the most to me were basically how they spoke about they had applied multiple times to about 7 to 9 schools. And even with that, that's a conservative, application, which I mean, I think is crazy because when I Googled it, it said apply to 4 to 6, right? And so I think that's something that a lot of students do need to be aware of, especially considering the cost of applying to schools, right? Like Sol had brought up, if one school has a $95 application fee, then you really need to decide, like, is this school worth applying to, especially when you are competing with so many other students for, 1 to 5 positions.
I just found it interesting. I mean, I'm in a master's, but like every time I was always talked about like grad school during that time. I kind of took a risk. I only applied to one school, which was FIU, and obviously I got in. Like, don't be like me. Definitely don't take that risk because you never know. So I think when Sol was saying that, it kind of like did hit hard. That was like, yeah, that's actually true, especially for PhD programs. Because like, yes, you're applying to PhDs, but then at the same time, you're also applying to masters as backup schools, just in case none of the PhD schools like accepted you, or you were not a finalist in the acceptance process. Like always having a backup school is very helpful as well.
Definitely. That's like, I don't know, that finding out was even like tighter than what I thought it was before. It is kind of crazy. And I feel like that's not something that's always spoken about a lot with grad programs. feels like it's talked about like it's just a continuation of undergraduate, but with like more rigorous, like information, where in reality it's like a whole nother ball game, right? But how would you say, I guess, Alyssa, that the like being in the master's program, the application or no, you only applied to FIU, but like I guess why did you only apply for the FIU master's? Just because you want to do LMHC?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. So like I kind of hunkered down and like sat with myself and decide like, do I want to spend 5 to 7 years in a program where I'm probably going to be stuck, or like in a program or with a mentor that I'm like, maybe this wasn't the best fit for me at this time, like, did I really see myself in that? So like I sat down and was like, actually, I'm already so over like going to school. I can't do this anymore. So that's when I was like, let me just do a master's. Like it's only a quick 2.5 years. And then obviously, regardless whether you're in a master's or a PhD, you still have a 2-year gap between. So that's your postdoc or like your postmasters, which you're getting those hours in to get licensed, like either to be a clinical psychologist or for being a licensed mental health counselor. So like it's still technically like I still need to wait before I'm actually a licensed clinician, but still like I would be done with school and be able to have like free time to do the things that I really need. Like we were talking about self-care, that I'm on that wagon, and like I want to eventually be there, and these 2 years will really help me versus like in a PhD, like maybe I'll have a little bit less time depending on the mentor that I had. So, kind of weighing the pros and cons, and I looked at both the 2 masters here at FIU, the professional counseling program as well as the counselor education clinical mental health counseling major, because it's not a track. When I went in, it was a track. Now it's a major. And I looked at the process, and like I had to do a video entry for the PCA, or like I had to turn in papers, or I had to do the GRE, and like I didn't want to do that extra step versus like my program, all I had to do was get my references, do an interview with them, and then like I didn't need to take any of the GRE stuff. So I felt like I needed to weigh my options a little bit, and like I decided on the counselor education program.
No, that's definitely really important. I guess I love that you had the presence of mind to just be able to know like this is it, this is what I'm applying for, and we're here about to graduate in December. So that's awesome. But yeah, don't be like Alyssa, because you're not Alyssa. Um so you went like straight through, right? Straight from undergrad to the master's. But yeah, I think that's something that Sol also kind of touched upon, right? On why they're like a big proponent for gap years is kind of figuring out that why. That like, a lot of people say like they're going to grad school because someone said they should, or because they think they should, or just for that title. But you should really sit back and say like, why a PhD? Why not a master's? Why am I even gonna do grad school in general? So I think that's like an important thing. But do you think like if you could do it all over again, do you think you would take a gap year, or would you just, stick to the route you took?
That's actually a great question. I actually like the way that I did it because I ended a lot faster than what I expected I would. Because if I were to take a gap year, yes, it would have helped me financially. Yes, it would have like helped me in many ways, probably like establish my self-care. It would have helped me establish a lot of things. But I feel like me doing it this way, I get to be licensed a lot faster and like get out into the workforce a lot faster versus like taking a gap year, like making myself a little bit more stable and then like going into it, So I think both options are great, but I think for me, I just am like I like to rush into things probably a little too fast, because in high school I went straight from high school, like graduating in June, then like the next week I was already in Miami-Dade College, like I didn't even take that summer off like everybody else was. Like I just went straight into college. I didn't want to take that time. I just wanted to finish school as fast as possible, and like that's pretty much what I'm doing. Like I just want to be done.
I definitely get that. So what I'm hearing is like, if you're someone who knows that you have that like consistent momentum and you want to keep it up and you can handle it, go ahead, do what you got to do. But maybe for some other people that might need their breaks, like really sit back and think about it. Because it seems like you knew what you wanted to do, you knew where you wanted to go, and you're like, since I already have this plan, I'm gonna go through it as quickly as possible. So that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
like again, like oh sorry to
No,
interrupt
no,
you.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Like I was saying, obviously it depends on the person. Like definitely there are people that take gap years, and like I appreciate like that they do that, because you know what, like it gives them that opportunity to like think, like focus on themselves and everything. It's just like for me, I was just like, I want to like be out there. I want to already like work in the field as fast as possible, like making a change, and then I'll like focus up and like be on that self-care wagon. But right now I'm just like grind.
What is it? Rise and grind? Yeah, rise and grind. Okay, that's definitely awesome. Any last thoughts from any of you guys?
I mean, I thought it was really interesting. For me, it's so up in the air because I do feel like I'm working really hard for this degree and I do want to have experience before I commit to something. But I mean, for now, what I'm feeling is like when it is my time to apply, maybe I will if like the options are right, but maybe I won't. Like it's something that I will know once I'm there, but it's
Yeah.
definitely so important to take that time with yourself and ask these questions. Why am I doing this? What am I going to benefit from it? You know, what responsibilities am I willing to take and not take? So I think it was good to hear this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting to listen to like two grad students' point of view on. So we have the speed runner, and then we have like the enjoyer. So I think it was really interesting hearing someone that took a 5-year gap, took the time to learn experience, and then hearing another grad student who just went for it. So I think it's interesting hearing the two sides, and I guess both of them obviously successful, doing what they want to do. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Different routes, but
They're getting there.
going towards their specific goal, I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think like another thing that's interesting in that is that we have our speedrunners doing a master's, and the one who really like took the time is doing the PhD. So that might factor into it too. Like, I don't know about speedrunning into a PhD per se, but even like, if you know what you want to do and you're prepared, then that might not be an issue. So again, this is not an experiment. It's a case study, I guess. But yeah, so like to know that. And I think one of the things that really lingered with me that Sol had brought up was that in doing the different positions and getting the experience, it really helped them figure out what they wanted to do, because they wanted to do a clinical PhD. Then they went into the clinical world and they said, JK, where's that applied social cultural, So that might be another important thing, like how you already knew like exactly what you wanted to do. You were on that tip so you could stay there. But for some people who might not have as much experience in doing that, then to go out and get that experience and say, oh, wait, I hate research. Maybe I shouldn't do a PhD, instead of locking themselves in or even dropping out, because, why go through all that process if you weren't going to end up staying? It's better to kind of do that exploration. It's something you can do in undergrad too, right? If you like join a research lab, like we're all in research labs, right? So that's something we can kind of see now. Okay, do we really like research? So yeah, I think that's super cool. So thank you everyone for joining us on this conversation about gap years and self-care as well. I think we had a lot of great insights and points made, and I learned something new. I hope you guys learned something new too. We would love it if our listeners out there, our past members, or passing into the future E's, I don't know, we'll find it like a fan name for you guys. So if you could tell us your thoughts about, the topics we talked about today. If you guys have any questions based on what you heard, or something that, stood out to you that you really enjoyed, that would be really awesome. So don't forget to follow us on Instagram at pass.fiu. That's pass.fiu on Instagram. And you can also join the PASS group chat by clicking our link tree in the Instagram bio. And you don't need to be a psych major to join. We have an electrical engineering major in the group. So, whatever you are, we will take you. We're like the Ugly Duckling's mom. Even if you're a little goose, that's fine. Join the ducks. So bye guys. Thank you for joining us.